All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Human Resources Appointments and Equity Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 18th. Council Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Brother Roberts Brown.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney. I see Mr. Sweeney on the screen, but he is muted. He is here. Ms. Conwell.
Present, sorry about
And I see Ms. Conwell also. She's just muted. We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Council Members Strawn, Baker, and Jones are also in attendance.
All right, thank you very much. Was there any public comment submitted?
No, Madam Chair, no one submitted any public comment.
All right, thank you very much. I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from the May 4th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second, Miller.
All right, seconded by Miller. Any questions, comments, or concerns? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. We have one item today, and so Council Clerk, if you will read that into the record, please.
Ordinance number 2021-0005, providing for modifications to and adoption of the Cuyahoga County Human Resources Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual to recognize Juneteenth as a paid county holiday.
All right, thank you so much. And we started discussion around this. So who will be stepping in and continuing on to give the presentation today for this legislation?
Madam Chair, Jesse Drucker, our Chief of Human Resources, will be leading this discussion.
All right. Director Drucker,
Good morning.
Have the floor.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. So the last discussion that this committee had was relative to the proposal of creating Juneteenth as a holiday for county employees. And I believe, Madam Chair, that there's been some other discussion because there was the discussion included whether or not we should recognize Election Day rather than Juneteenth as a holiday. And I believe that we've had some discussions in the interim, and that there is an amended resolution that's been circulated that calls for Juneteenth as the holiday, but also memorializes the arrangement concerning Election Day that was offered to county employees last year, and that worked rather well, parenthetically, that they could become poll workers for the Board of Elections, and that they would receive their county pay on that particular they would receive county pay on that particular day, and additional pay that's offered by the Board of Elections. So I believe that that's a proposal that may be circulating prior to being introduced to the committee.
All right, and it is, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Council President Jones.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I do, although I'm not a member of the committee, I do have a proposed amendment. In fact, I'll take a moment. As many of you know, I wanted to make the general election day in every year a county holiday. After Juneteenth was included in some of the union negotiations, it was going to be an administrative challenge to allow some employees off on Juneteenth and other employees off on Election Day. To go along with my original statements and intent of making Election Day a county holiday to help carry on the democratic foundations of this country, I have worked on the proposed substitute, Chantel Brown, and asked my colleagues to support this. The proposed substitute, which is in front of you today, will keep the recognition of Juneteenth as a county holiday for all employees, but adds leave for county employees to serve as poll workers for the Board of Elections on Election Day. The language in this proposed substitute regarding the poll worker leave nearly mirrors the workers last summer, which authorized them to serve as poll workers for the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections for the November 2020 general election. The language in the proposed substitute allows poll workers leave for every election moving forward and incorporates the leave into the HR policies and procedures manual. This leave allows for county employees to work as poll worker for the Board of Elections without having to use any of their other types of leave, so long as their supervisor or manager signs off on it. The legislation would also allow them to receive the poll worker stipend on top of their normal county salary because their work on election day will be much longer than their normal work day. All required training by the Board of Elections to serve as a poll worker will be on the employee's own time. Under the proposed substitute, the county employee will only be able to work for the Board of Elections if, first, their supervisor or manager says it's okay, and if, second, the Board of Elections needs the employee on election day. If the employee fails to show up on election day to serve as a poll worker and doesn't show up to their county job, the employee will be required to use other types of leave, such as sick or vacation. After each election, the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections will confirm with the county what employees worked on election day. Those county employees that live outside of the county will have to receive a letter that they worked for their respective Board of Elections. Cuyahoga County Board of Elections Director Tony Perlotti is on this Zoom to answer questions and discuss how important this type of county program is to his recruitment efforts of poll workers. I'm not a member of this committee, so I asked someone of this committee that supports to move the proposed substitute and again, ask for a second as well. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President. I move to move forward with the proposed substitute. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Conwell, although I see you. Thank you, Councilwoman Conwell. All right. Are there any questions on the proposed substitute? Okay, if there are none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you very much. Any opposed? All right, so before we move to pass the legislation, I do want to have Mr. Perlotti speak. And just one question on the legislation, I probably should have presented this, but just a point of clarification more so. Those who live outside of Cuyahoga County are not required to work in their respective county. That is just an option of convenience. They can work for Cuyahoga County or their respective county. Is that correct, Council President? No, okay, Council, I see head shaking. Okay, Mr. McAleer, I see you. Can you chime in?
Yeah, Councilwoman Brown. Good morning, Trevor McAleer, County Council staff. And Director Perlotti can speak to this, but if you are a registered voter in another county, you can only work in that county. So that's why the language differs in the legislation, that if you work for, say, Summit County Board of Elections, you have to get a letter, because our systems, of course, don't talk with Summit County like it does with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it over to Director Perlotti. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you'll give us some background and share with us why this legislation is important.
First of all, thank you all for having me this morning and for considering this proposal, because it is something that is greatly appreciated and quite honestly needed for us here in Cuyahoga County to continue to execute the good, fair, open, and transparent elections that we do. The Ohio Revised Code, as a matter of background, sets what the PEO requirements are. And that's in Title 35, and that is for each precinct, we are to hire 4 precinct election officials. In Cuyahoga County, we have 975 precincts, so that math works out to 3,900. So it's quite a lot. In our single precinct location, so a lot of, if you go to the polls on election day, we have a lot of precincts that are in one location, but we do have some where it's just one precinct for location. Maybe about 30 of those. And we try to hire about 3 additional PEOs for those locations, because people do need a break. We want to make sure that we have sufficient coverage so we have a good flow of work. So really, it builds up that we need 4,000 people to effectively run an election on election day. To get that 4,000, we actually recruit and hire about 25% over. So that means 5,000. So we seek out 5,000 people to ultimately land at that 4,000 number. It is a difficult task to do. And as we have, we used to be able to have about an 85% retention rate of people coming back from election to election. But since 2018, that's kind of gone down to about 75%. So we have less people who keep coming back year after year. Not sure why. We know last year was a unique year, and COVID played a big role in that, but there's just a little bit more interest in people doing these. So we struggle to find those numbers that we need. And so last year, as you know, this body passed a resolution to allow us to have that county poll worker program, and that was a tremendous help. We had 280 county employees who came out and worked as poll workers on election day, which when you take the 280 over 4,000, it's about 7% of our workforce. And so that is a substantial number, and was actually necessary for us to meet our goals. So by having a program like this and something that is reoccurring election after election, people understand that it just becomes a normal program that they can hopefully participate in. With that, we hope that we at least get that 7% interest, and maybe even a little bit higher, getting up to hopefully 10% of our workforce that would come from our county employees. With that, not only do we make our numbers, but we would hope that these individuals, who we would probably be able to get in contact a little bit more throughout the year, could hopefully work with them to promote them up, maybe even to supervisory roles within the polling location, and get that consistency there, which again helps us run the good elections that we do. There are a couple of other counties in the state who they may not necessarily have in their policy manual, but they do kind of have an ongoing program. Two of those being Franklin County and Montgomery County, both large counties here in the state, where they have a longer term county poll worker program, and they have reaped the benefits of that over the years, and keep telling me that, hey, Tony, if you can get that, that is a game changer for you to be able to successfully execute your elections. So that is a little bit of the history and why we need some of this. It's because of the large volume, because of individuals not getting the same retention that we did, and especially in odd number years, which we consider our municipal years. As you all know, in general, voter participation goes down. They're not as excited as they are in the even year elections. And when voter participation goes down, so does the desire to work at the polls in those years. So it becomes even a little bit harder in the odd years, sometimes in the even years, to get those numbers that we need. And so, again, having a uniform program that it doesn't fluctuate, is it on or is it off depending on what the election is, helps, I think, us as a Board of Elections plan to execute our elections. And I think the employees at the county to know that, okay, this is something that I can participate each time, and not without confusion as to if the program is on or off.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to my colleagues, or if they have any questions. Councilman Sweeney, I see you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Director, and my colleagues. Hello. Just got a couple of questions, Director, if you don't mind. The first one is, what's the salary? What's their daily rate for the worker and the supervisor?
So for the regular worker, the precinct election official, we pay $172. And for the supervisor or manager of the location, we'll pay $200.
Okay.
And that incorporates their service and the training.
Sounds good. And it's 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. What's the time commitment?
So on election day itself, we ask them to report at 5:30 a.m. And typically they're leaving about 8:30 p.m. So it is about a 15-hour day. We do ask them the day before to go for a Monday night organizational meeting to do a pre-setup of the polling location, which they can do in about an hour. Sometimes if it's a little difficult for some of the workers, or if they're short-staffed, it can get up to about 2 hours. And then the training, if they are a returning worker, meaning that they've worked in a previous election, we provide an online option, which they can do that online option in probably up to about 2 hours. It's self-paced. They do it on their own schedule. But if they are a new worker and need to go into a in-person training class because they need to get some hands-on experience with the electronic poll books, that is probably closer to 3 hours.
Thank you. How many different election dates are there in a municipal year? Do you know that?
So we know, for example, like this year, coming into this year, the known would be 3. We would have a May primary, a September primary, and a November primary. However, this year, we know of 6 elections because we had one also in February, one in March. We will have an August election. So right now we're aware of 6 for this year, but in an odd year, typically we can count on at least 3.
Plus, historically, a special election here and there throughout the years. So the average could be 5, maybe yearly. Minimum 3.
It could be a minimum. I would say, yeah, that would be good. A 3 to 5 would probably be accurate.
Got it. And with your, this is wonderful for fulfilling your need, because I know there's a hole. And you said there's 4,000. You probably get 3,000 to come back regularly. You're not really worried. You need to fill 1,000 spots. Is that basically what I heard? And if 7% came from the county, the 18%, is that hard to fill? You use other resources too, or you prefer if the county filled the other 1,000, that would be beneficial to you because you don't have to do anything else in regards to recruitment?
The greater participation we can get from the county, definitely more beneficial it is to us because we have it coming from that one source. Otherwise, we are using social media, trying to talk to the political parties, schools, and just trying to get interest in it. So if you have a large employer like the county who is willing or able to send a larger quantity, that definitely is preferable.
Got it. So you would cease, if there was a consistent stream from the county, you would not cease, but hold back a little bit on your recruitment in other places, but you still do some. Because there's another universe out there.
Correct.
That the returners like it, but there's a whole nother world of, wow, that'd be a cool gig. A lot of work, but I get, a paycheck for a day. We won't be Xing those
That is
people.
correct.
Okay.
No, so we would, we have some other duties too, like rovers that assist that are not necessarily a poll worker, but they're critical for us executing our duties. We, as well as to get that retention, you just naturally, just like with any employer, you have attrition. So somebody works their last election and hopefully you can fill in that vacancy with a new person who's up and coming. May not be the county employee. So if the county employee is filling, say, a 25% void, you still will have that 75%. Well, you'll have to put new bodies in there each election, just as people are no longer interested or technically, I guess, retire.
Yeah, and these are just rough numbers that are pretty accurate for historical data. With this legislation, have you, since it's very specific, I think it says precinct poll worker, does it make sense for us to expand it a little bit to say whatever needs of workers are for the election day operation? Do we put the rover in or stuff like that? Do you have a comment on that, or to my colleagues or to my president? I think that might make some sense.
I would yield to Director Pilati and the law department as to the language which we should utilize. I personally don't have any objections because I think if we can provide people with the opportunity to fill in those gaps for the BOE, then I certainly would welcome that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for your patience with me. I just had a sequence of questions, and the director that was very you filled me in with the answers that I needed, and I'd like to relinquish my time, but reserve the right to have a conversation with my Director of Human Service or HR when it's my time. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I see Councilwoman Conwell has her hand raised.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Pallotti. Has there been any additional incentives thought of pay for maybe 2 to 3 year returnees, or is this permissible by the Ohio Revised Code?
So the pay for poll workers, it is set in the Ohio Revised Code. There are some things that we can do to kind of go above and beyond what that minimum amount is, and we do that. And what we do is the code will kind of set some parameters as far as what your compensation would be for election day itself. And then what we do is we go above that and give additional funding for attending the Monday night organizational meeting the day before, as well as for the training. And that's how we're able to come up with the number that we do. As far as increasing poll worker pay, that is something that I would like to do. Of course, it has a budgetary impact that we need to do. We did do it in 2020, and that is with the assistance of Executive Budish providing some CARES dollars, and we were actually able to add $75 onto each employee. So basically the 172 became 250, and the 200, 275. And of course, the more you pay, a little bit more attractive it is and a little bit easier to find some individuals. We don't have those CARE dollars this year, so we went back down to what our standard rate of pay is. So I think we can, again, legislatively, the day itself, that's kind of set, but again, we can, we have the ability for the training, for the Monday night organizational meeting to add money. We do, and we would be able to increase that if we did have an appropriation for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other? Yeah, yes, Councilman Miller, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I just have one question perhaps for staff, and it's as to whether the substitute that we just put in front of us, does it provide this benefit to county employees only for the November elections of every year, or does it apply to every election, whether it's a primary, special, or general?
Councilman Miller, this is Trevor Mackler again, County Council staff. It applies to all elections that the Board of Elections would need help for.
Hey, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions from my colleagues?
I would just add that I support Councilman Sweeney's suggestion that we should perhaps tweak the language so that it doesn't have to be specifically a precinct poll worker, but could be any of the other kinds of assistance that the Board of Elections needs on Election Day.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. I would ask again, Director. Yes, yes. Is that Director who?
This is Greg. Yeah, I've just been taking a look through the statute and the language that this is a program that's I guess originates in the Ohio Revised Code and specifically uses the language precinct election official, and that phrase has a defined purpose in the ORC. So I would suggest that in order to not get into any conflict with anybody here, we just leave it as it is. It isn't consistent with the ORC the way it's written.
Thank you, Director. I guess the question then becomes for Director Pallotti and for Director Drucker, if someone is hired to potentially serve in another role, that would not prohibit them from exercising the benefits that are being proposed today?
I mean, I would
I agree.
suggest that as long as that position falls within the parameters of the ordinance, that would not prohibit them.
Okay. All right. Are there
Just on
any?
a follow-up on Councilman Miller's comment to Trevor.
Go ahead,
uh,
Councilman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Director Pallotti. When Trevor said every election that the Board of Elections needs help, that would be every election though, right?
I would say the vast majority outside of, for example, like a, in this past February, it was 1 precinct. March was 4 precincts. That we can do very easily. But when you start to get into like this past May, it was about 200 precincts and on. Yes, that we can definitely use the assistance in all those types of what I'll call substantial elections size.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up through my chairwoman. You'll be the one notifying the Director Drucker's office to say, this is how many we need. Can you go see if we can get the employees to do it? Or how will we know if there's a need? Is it through you? And how would you reach out?
I would say, yeah, I think I would say that yes, and I think that would be me or my office working with Director Drucker in the Human Resources Department for the county on the need, being able to provide the names of the people who have signed up, both prior to election day, post-election day, so we can meet the other criteria in the ordinance as far as who appeared and who's entitled to the actual leave based on all those things.
And we have the facilities of broadcasting that.
Perfect. And I'm just trying to get this is very helpful to the Board of Elections. I'm just trying to get the sequence down so I understand it very specifically. So thank you very much to the two directors.
However, my recollection was that last year, I think it went through Michelle Pomerantz's office last year, if I'm not mistaken.
She's affirming. Okay, and then I saw Councilman Shrine Jones and then Conwell. Councilman Shrine, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to wait till all the committee got their questions out. If you want me to wait till Council Conwell asks hers, whatever your preference would be.
You have the
floor.
floor.
Okay, thank you very much. How many elections do we talk about that are potentially this year? This could be applicable.
I think he said that there were 5 elections this year.
That's
Unusual. Two specials that occurred, if I'm not mistaken, and 3 that were on the calendar.
Okay, I guess that's what I thought. So theoretically, this legislation could be applying to 5 dates, not just what I thought was potentially only going to be the one general election date. So I just want to make sure I understood that. What is the cost of 200 employees for the county to be giving an extra day, a paid day? Mr. Palmer?
I can work up the math
Director?
for you in a moment.
What did you
I can
calculate?
work up the math for you now.
Have you
Let me
already
just work up the
calculated
math for. I've not calculated that. Just if you
And I
would
think
hang
in
on.
fairness, Councilman Shrine, it would depend on the employee as well, but we're looking at, taking the pay that they would normally get and actually adding the bonus, if you will, from working on the Board of Elections. So if I'm not mistaken, if this is anything like what we discussed in the past, it doesn't cost us, it doesn't have a cost to the bottom line, if you will, maybe on the production side. But yeah, I don't think that there's an added cost to the bottom line. And I would yield to Director Drucker as it relates to that. But we had this discussion.
So the approximate daily rate is about $210. The average for the average salary. So that would be based on 280. That's approximately just a little under $60,000.
$60,000.
Just a little under $60,000, yeah.
So
But that's
$60,000.
not additional. That's not additional cost, Councilman.
It would be if the person was taking that day as a personal day. So that cost, it is a cost. When people say that a personal day doesn't cost the county money, if it was, it does cost the $60,000. I have a hard time understanding the math that doesn't come out to that being a cost.
Councilman, I didn't say that it wasn't a cost. I said it was not an additional cost.
If the person was going to take that as a personal day, and now they're not taking it as a personal day, is that an additional cost? If, for example,
it would be categorized differently. It moves from productive time to non-productive time.
Right.
To be sure, it's not. As Ms. Brown said, it is not it's not an additional cost to the bottom line.
It only becomes additional if that PTO or that paid time off is something we're going to compensate the person for when they leave, retire, or use it for other purposes. So that, well,
yes,
it is a cost. I just have a hard time understanding. You indicated that we're paying between $175 and $200 to the citizen who's working on the election day. What do you think will happen if the person now knows that the person standing next to them is a county employee, that 93%, and they're going to be getting more than 200%, double the amount of what they're going to be receiving? Is there any unintended consequences do you think will happen to that 93%? If I look over and say that person next to me is a county employee and they're getting more than twice what I'm getting paid to do the same exact work, do you think that our 93% will start to drop? Whichever director wants to speak to that, because it just seems to me the unintended consequence will be that some people will not think it's fair that the person standing next to them is getting twice the pay and getting time off out of this.
Through the chair, the Director of Regional Collaboration, Michelle Pomerantz, as I worked on this last year, both with Director Pallotti as well as Director Drucker, there are other organizations that have put some of the same sort of opportunities for poll workers, either with getting some credits if they're an attorney, or other ways of getting involved in elections. So while the person next to me may not be from the Cuyahoga County and making having this opportunity, they could be from another business that uses their opportunities on election day to help out their employees and the Board of Elections. So I don't know how much of an impact it would be based on my recollection of the folks who were at the polling location in Westlake. There were others around me that had other options from their employers as well.
That was, Michelle, on that, of the 93%, how many do you think get paid by their private employer versus taxpayer?
That'd be zero.
I have qualitative data, so they might have gotten the credits that you get if you're an attorney. But I also didn't hold them either.
Yeah, I mean, I know last year we as attorneys, we were going to get CLE credits, and that's worth whatever the value of the cost of paying for the CL, but it's not being compensated for it. If we were to pay the same amount of money to private sector, Mr. Director, and offered to double theirs, do you think you would be able to cover that gap that you're worried about? If we made this exact same offer,
I just want to,
with the same taxpayer money to private citizens to double it, and I know we can't do it legally because you said that that's controlled by the Ohio Revised Code. Essentially, we're.
I just want to make sure I understand. I'm sorry.
Essentially, we're paying the county employee what we couldn't do to another individual. They're getting compensation twice what the private citizen is going to get paid.
So just to clarify the question, yeah. So if I were able to pay every precinct election official, for example, double, so $350, would I be able to recruit more? I would guess probably, again, because it just becomes a more lucrative position for them. But do I think that if the county were to go forward with this program, and would other PEOs who are currently working fall off? I don't think so. I mean, ultimately they're both getting the $172 to work the day. If they're asked, that's what they're each making. There is, portion of these people, and I don't know what that portion is though, it's civic duty. So they stand, they come up for that, and some of them would do it for no pay. Now I wouldn't say that that'd be the vast majority of them, but I don't think that maybe you would have some fall off, but I don't think that we would have people just leaving en masse because they were to somehow find out that one of their coworkers was a county employee participating in the program.
If it's civic duty for the other 93%, why isn't it civic duty for our 7%?
No, I said a portion of it, not all 93%. There's a portion of them who they just step up and they do it. I don't think the compensation matters to them. But I think again, it's I don't know how much, because I haven't been there to listen to the poll workers talk about their pay with each other and what benefits they have from their private employers, if they have a private employer, or if they're retired, and what their pension contribution is that they're getting while they're working the polls. We don't have data on any of those types of things.
I don't believe it will be very long before they realize that the taxpayers are paying for both of these for county employees. Before that information will get out. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a moment and to weigh in on Councilman Sweeney's comment. I understand the intent of what he would desire to do, but my feeling is that the legislation should stay as it is at this moment. So I just wanted to weigh in on that for the committee.
Thank you very much, Council President Jones.
Through the chair to Director Drucker. Director Drucker, can you speak? I have two questions and a request. Can you speak to how this impacts the AFSCME provision recently that was voted on?
The AFSCME provision would be separate and apart. Part of the resolution authorizes the county executive to negotiate independently. So AFSCME would have to negotiate we've given the release. We gave the release time last year across the board. It did not have an effect on whether someone was represented or non-represented. I would ask the law department whether this resolution changes that circumstance, and do the collective bargaining agents now have to negotiate the release for election day? Because the new resolution says that the county executive is authorized to negotiate those provisions. So, Ms. Conwell, with all due respect, I think part of that question is better directed to law.
Okay.
Director Hoop.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman, and I may call on Sarah here to back me up on some of this, but the AFSCME provision that Councilwoman Conwell is referring to, that fact-finding report actually said that if council approved it for 2021, then AFSCME would get it in 2021. So that's how it would be interpreted in this case. If this gets approved ultimately by council, then AFSCME will get it under that fact-finder's recommendation. As to the other units, it kind of depends on the language in each of the CBAs. Some of them say that they get whatever everybody else gets. Some of them say we have to negotiate with them. So it just depends on which unit we're talking about, which CBA we're working under.
Thank you. If there is, if this passes, when will it start? If this legislation passes? Which election cycle?
My understanding is it's to take effect immediately, so it would be immediately.
It would be for the August election, would be the first election, Councilwoman Conwell, this legislation would be eligible for.
All right, and final request, Director Drucker, through the chair to Director Drucker, can we have a list of employees every election cycle that will be utilized if this passes? And what the costs
Those who
are?
actually work those who actually do work at the Board of Elections.
Right, as a county employee, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem, Councilwoman Conwell. I will say this, Councilman Gallagher, go ahead, you have the floor. If I may, before I turn the floor over to you, one of the things that we had originally discussed around this proposal, and maybe Mr. Boyle can speak to this, is that I think the provision to allow the day off on election day was given historically, but that was not exercised to the degree that one may have hoped for, or in the case of Mr. Schron, that to the excess that one might expect. So this provision that an amendment that we're introducing kind of puts that civic responsibility back into the onus of the employer and the supervisor if it is a so I think that this is a fair compromise, if you will, because it is, I think, is also important to recognize how we got here in the first place. Since Councilwoman Conwell brought to the table the AFSCME contract, where one of the requests was a floating personal day, which probably would have been a little bit easier to process. But while governing is not always the easiest to do, so we have to have diversity of thought and conversations to try to find the best resolution for the majority of the people involved. And so I am actually very pleased with this compromise. So if Mr. Boyle can chime in on the historical, and then I'd be happy to turn the floor over to Councilman Gallagher and then Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Jim Boyle, council staff. In drafting the provisions that are now before you, the council staff looked at some historical aspects as well. And dating back to the times of the commissioners, there had been programs in place to allow county employees to serve as election officials. And so the concept, even though it perhaps was a new endeavor for some of the county council members, certainly as it was in last November, we had done these in the past. And so the legalities of it, I think, are known. The finer points of it obviously are ones that we'll have to iron out and I think are before you. But yes, this is something that we have done in the past and have done successfully. And to chime in a little bit more, Madam Chair, on that before turning it over to Councilman Gallagher, I think more so now, the need, and Mr. Prelati can chime in if I'm wrong, I think the need for trained election officials is even greater now than it ever has been. And so I think that anything we as a county can do to facilitate or foster that skilled election official would be helpful to all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Councilman Gallagher, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting when we first discussed Juneteenth, and then now the add-on of the election day. And Mr. Boyle's correct. Historically, it was like a half day if you're a county employee, but you always had to take a personal day or vacation day to do it. I would consider this as a positive if it were for general elections only. If you're getting into every election, I think it's overkill as far as need, unless somebody can prove to me that need is there, and I've not seen anything like that. I would have anticipated that would have been placed before us today to make this decision a lot easier. But on general elections, absolutely, there's need involved. Mr. Schron is indeed correct, because I have 3 people on my street alone that work, they used to work at the polls and kind of fell off. They enjoyed the day, but the pay was an issue and treatment was an issue. And I can't even imagine what the thought would be going forward if they found out county personnel were there being paid even a nickel more than they. So that's somewhat problematic. I wish these issues were bifurcated for decision, because on the Juneteenth, while I don't have a problem with the overall discussion of this, I think it rightfully belongs in the State House, where the entire state should have the day off. Ohio being the third most populous state during the Civil War, having lost the second most amount of soldiers. So Ohio blood was spilled in the endeavor to free the slaves, and that should be recognized, I think, by the state that lost so much to provide so much to those in need. I do have a problem with telling people, the taxpayers, that your county is going to be shut down and the very people that your tax dollars pay are going to be off while you're going to work. I got a real issue with that. If it were across the board in the state, that issue goes away. But the way this is set up, it's set up for poisoning the well, so to speak, because these are the people that we're going to go ask for money for HHS levies, for various monies down the road. And I don't know about my colleagues, but I can tell you, I can't answer realistically or honestly why the taxpayers don't get that day off, yet the people that they pay to work for them are going to be off. It's a dangerous, slippery slope, and that therein lies my concern with that. So the way it's set right now, I certainly will move this out of committee, but I cannot support it on a whole. I wish I could, but I can't do that to the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gallagher. Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To Director Drucker, just or to Michelle, because it sounds like, where's this going to fall under if it does pass? Whose responsibility to coordinate this on the county side?
It would fall to human resource. It would fall to human resources, Councilman.
That's what, because it just went, because it was something that was a one-time. Michelle was, or Director Pomerantz was able to manage it the first time because it was a one-time deal. Now it's going to be permanent.
Yes, and we'll and we will set up a process. We'll set up a process and notification for that. The ultimate responsibility for approval would rest with the supervisors and department heads and chiefs, and an employee would have to go forward to them, and then we would initiate special payroll codes so that we would be able to track who participated with the Board of Elections and who did not. The employee would have to bring back some type of justification the day following the election.
Got it. I'm going to go a little bit with the process, because it seems like we're going to be setting up something that we're going to pass and make it part of a handbook, but we don't have all the structure in place to manage it. Would that be accurate right now?
Right at this moment, yes. Sitting here and now, yes.
Yeah, and just bear with me for a second.
Sure.
Could there be, I'm thinking it could be somewhat problematic that it's up to a supervisor to allow the decision. Is it a supervisor for its entire folks that work under or with them, because they can individually pick, or is it by division or department or supervisor where nobody can do it because they're on?
Depends on it. That's a very broad question, Councilman. It depends on the operations of the individual department. You have departments of all shapes and sizes. If you look at Health and Human Services, they have a very broad span of control with department directors there. If you look at some of the smaller departments, there may be one director and a small number of employees. So it's a very broad question.
It's very broad, but very specific though too. I want to know, if I could eventually, not right now, of what divisions and what the supervisor's realities are. Supervisor A has the nobody from their shop because they're all critical. Supervisor B can do it because they have flexibility. They can do 5. Supervisor C, they can do it all because there's so many of them. Because that just, I'm worried about the workforce feeling they're not treated equally because one can do it and one cannot. Because a day off is something that some people would like and some people would not want to choose to do it. Because we have 4,500 individuals that are available. Is that the?
Yes.
And then we have.
That's the approximate number, yes.
Just with the very first time in 2020, and I might sound fussy now. I'm just trying to understand this because I don't want to do something that is important to take care of the Board of Elections and help have a stream in civic duty and have a opportunity to restore a bunch of confidence in the election process. We lost none when we were in Cuyahoga County, just overall. But to have, I don't want to have a headache on the other side or just some complications. Because if 280 people or employees or coworkers did it in 2020 for one general election without much push out of saying, hey, do it, getting to 1,000 might not be that unrealistic. And then after we get to 1,000, we have 3,500 people, coworkers that may want to do it and they won't be able to. So I don't know if could that be a challenge? Could that be a union issue? Could that be whatever? So I just wanted to throw that out as a point to ponder as we're structuring.
No, I don't believe that it would be subject to grievance, number one. Number two, management has an inherent right to determine the amount of employees that are needed on any given day to keep the operation secure. Department heads could either designate or they could take it on a first come, first served basis in terms of the number of people that they can release. I don't think there's any hard and fast number that you can put to it, but I think that each individual supervisor or director could say the number of people that could be released on any given day.
Good. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And with, are we going to have a uniform county policy that says it's going to be first come, first serve? It's going to be a list. It's going to be rotating, just so there's no.
I think the ordinance speaks to that, or at least the ordinance speaks to that, if I remember correctly, and that it's on a first come, first serve basis.
Okay. And the definition of first come, first serve, now I'm getting really down in the weeds, is
the person who requests the time from their supervisor.
Yeah, they post it and whoever writes it in first or emails first would be.
Yep.
I would be and just one, if we stay with, someone could have actually 5 extra days of working for the polls per year. And I'm just trying to coordinate if one has 5 and somebody misses it, they know how to do this, but it's really up knowing the system. So as we develop this, I'll just be more aware. So I beat this pretty good, but I have a better handle on it. And
yes.
Director,
and I give you some assurances that we will broadcast a procedure for the departments.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, Councilman.
No, this is the direction from our council president is this is exactly what should be doing to help our Board of Elections. I just want to make sure that functionality, or not make sure, just to bring awareness, the functionality of our ability our county executive to have a workforce that's working to be able to do their responsibilities, but also keep the morale up, because I can see some possible drama if 4,500 people want it and there's only 1,000 spots max. So thank you very much.
Councilman Jones, Council President Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Parlati, in November of last year, how many county employees actually took advantage of this opportunity?
And for the November 2020 election, we had 280 employees who trains. We actually had 410 county employees sign up. From that 410, 280 of them actually attended the training and showed up and worked for us on election day.
So in theory, although 4,500 have the opportunity, only 200 took advantage. Do you imagine that that number will dramatically increase, or will there have to be somewhat of a campaign where you have to have more postings and make people aware to see that number grow? Do you expect it? What are your thoughts on the number?
So I would hope that would grow, and I think that it will grow. I think it was, as been said here today, it was the first time that this has happened in a long time that employees have had that opportunity. I think as individuals become a little bit more aware of that opportunity, I think they will want to participate in it. I think also the COVID existed for county workers just like it did for non-county workers who worked at the polls. And so that was a deterrent, I think, for some individuals. So as we move forward with more and more people being vaccinated and things changing, they might be a little bit more willing to come out and do it this time. The need is definitely there, and in order to fill up these numbers, and county employees are good employees, and we look forward to having them help us out because they definitely understand customer service and serving the community. So I do think that it will grow, and I would hope that I know what the legislation is that's in front of the body, and I appreciate that, and I also understand the comments that were made. Definitely, general elections are very important, but as we know, in the even years, we have countywide primary elections, so you're still trying to get the same number of individuals to participate there. And even this year, August will be more than 50% of the county in that election. And this year, the city of Cleveland, per their charter, they're on the ballot, and so we'll have substantial turnout there too. So they are large elections that we have on the horizon here in this upcoming remainder of this year. So there is that need, and even in the fall we have back-to-back elections for all intents and purposes, where we need the assistance in getting those individuals to successfully execute all three of those. So I would hope that it would grow. Very dedicated and ready to work with Director Drucker on whatever things we need to do in order to have those parameters and the information flow back and forth between the two entities to make sure that everyone has all the information that they need so we can have the most inclusive and fair process available to all employees.
Well, thank you, sir. I know your need is real. So I certainly want to help to do what we can to address that need. But the county also has need as well, as far as to continue to provide the taxpayer provided services that we have. Can I ask you this, when it comes to the supervisors, is part of their determination of saying yes or even no to an employee the fact that they want to continue the daily operations of the county? And that's probably directed at Mr. Drucker more so than Mr. Pilati.
Yes, absolutely, Council President. That criteria is going to be determined by the continuity of service provided. It's not going to be treated by department heads and supervisors as the opportunity of giving people a day off. It'll be done within the parameters of continuing the high level of service that we're proud of delivering.
There we go. So that the election day will not cause an interruption in the taxpayer provided deserved service, although individuals may have their respective opportunity to provide theirs, to give their civic duty to the polls.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I just have one follow-up with my Council President's comments.
I
have a question.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to hold your thought, Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Baker, and I'm going to acknowledge Councilman Miller and then Conwell.
Thank you.
So Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I just have one question as to regarding both Juneteenth and the Board of Elections provisions. To what extent do these provisions apply just to the departments that are under the county executive's direct control, or do they apply more broadly to other areas of county government, like the prosecutor's office, the courts, the developmental disabilities board, etc.?
Madam Chairman, this is Greg.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this legislation will just apply to the employees under the jurisdiction of the executive.
And by way of follow-up, do you expect that some of the other areas may choose to follow on by their own action?
I'm sorry, I have no information on that in that area, so I can't help you with that one.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Councilman. Councilwoman Conwell.
Yes, through the chair, Councilman Miller asked my question, but I just wanted to go on record and say that I support the executive's recommendation to add Juneteenth to the county holidays list, and support our council president's need to strengthen our election processes as well. So I just wanted to go on record and ask my name to be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Conwell. So Councilman Sweeney, you've had the floor. I'm going to allow you one question, and Councilwoman Baker has been very patient. Sorry, Councilman Sweeney.
I appreciate that. Two very simple ones. Can you define supervisor for me? And what do you think would be the tools used to increase participation or advertisements to our county workers saying, you can do this, it's a good thing to do, this is a benefit. And if we do that, I know the numbers will go up significantly in regards to participation from my perspective. Thank you. Can you define supervisor?
I think probably have I'm going to go ahead, Director Drucker.
So a supervisor is the one who has one-on-one contact with directly with frontline workers.
Thank you.
If you're asking for a definition, but we have a number of vehicles, Councilman. We have a number of vehicles by which we communicate to employees in the know from the county executive. We have an employee wellness. We have an employee wellness website that we communicate. We have notices that go out monthly there. Departments have their departmental newsletters. There are a number of directors that have their own weekly roundup to their own staff. So we have a fairly robust way of communicating to people about these opportunities.
Absolutely. That's exactly how it should be done. And Madam Chairwoman, thank you. And I will be quiet for the rest of this meeting.
I won't hold you to that. Thank you for the hopeful promise. Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to be in your meeting this morning. It's very interesting. One question for Mr. Perlotti, just to make sure we have a good base of what we're talking about and need. You said in 2020, we were 75% down in what we typically have in volunteers. Is that correct?
Point of clarification. So since 2018 through present, our retention has gone from about 85% retention down to 75% retention. So it's over the course of the past couple of years that it's happened. In 2020, we actually we only had about a 30% retention because of the pandemic. And so we put out 70% new workers in 2020. So trying to come up with it's not always apples to apples, but trying to look at some of the data and come up with it over from 2018 to present, it's about 75% retention.
All right. And I guess I would not include 2020 because it's an anomaly. And I don't think that, unless we have another pandemic or another scare why people stay huddled, I don't think we should really include that year. So 2021 hopefully will be a better gauge as far as public participation. If I may, the next question I had, if we have 280 on the average that would be participating and potentially more, and we pay them each $210, that's $60,000 a year. And over 5 different elections, that's $300,000 a year. And that's only if the number stays at 280. It only sounds like it is encouraged to increase. I just want to make sure we understand the cost of what we're talking about just for this one item. Also, on top of that, we are a county of service. We hire employees, and we hire a number of employees for specific purposes. And to take 280 or more county employees out of service 5 times a year, I don't know how we explain that we don't need those employees for those days. I mean, we have those that are involved in children's services. They may be in a program or doing something with a child that they can't afford to take. And many of them are in that position, or helping older adults, or helping with, many of the services, housing. How can we explain how we can, as much as we'd like to help the Board of Elections, take service workers, even in public works, if they're working on, roads and bridges and things that we think are important? How can we take that many people out of service and say that those that are left are going to have to pick up the slack and do what they do for that day? How have we thought about that?
If I may just chime in for a second, Councilwoman Baker, I think the notion that we would need that number of people for every that I know, particularly in my district, there was a special election, Woodmere. It was a unique situation. And I would yield to Director Prelati to speak to the number of individuals that were needed to address that. I know that May was a special election that did not encompass the entire county. So I don't want to give my colleagues the impression that 280 is what's consistently needed for every election. Am I correct in stating that, Dr. Director Prelati?
Madam Chair, yes, you are. Yes, you are. So for the Woodmere election in February, actually, I staffed that with all my internal staff because it was just one precinct, and I was able to do that. In March, the village, Mayfield Village, had an election which involved 4 precincts, and I staffed half of it with my staff, and the other half from members of the community there. So those, there wouldn't be a need necessarily for county employees to assist with those. This past May 4th, we had 196 precincts, so we needed about 800 employees for that. We could use 280, but wouldn't necessarily have to use 280 for an election of that, though. I did need to, come up with 25 to 30% of the workers that were new for the election, and that's where the county could help out there, and those numbers could be smaller. As we go into the fall, as I said, those elections are much bigger. August being more than 50% of the county, September at least a third, if not more, and of course the countywide. So every election has a different need, and with the biggest need obviously being in the countywide, but we would look at it on an election by election basis. And as was mentioned before, I could work with Director Drucker on providing kind of what the need would be for a particular election type.
I hope that's helpful. Additionally, to your other question, Councilwoman Baker, having had the honor and privilege of working several election cycles, I know that many of the people who have participated in working these elections are members of the senior community and retired community. So somewhat to your point, it was challenging in 2020 to get them to participate in that election. But I do think it also speaks to our colleague Gallagher's point, is that it's an aging population that I think is getting less and less inclined. And I would yield to Director Pallotti. And so that need is going to increase. Historically, that are a little more seasoned, that have done this work, but I think as they get a little bit older, they're less inclined to endure a 15-hour day. So again, I'm not sure that just the notion of the pandemic is the sole reason for the reduction in participation in the election. Because I've witnessed, and you probably have seen it in your own community, that it's usually your friendly neighborhood retiree working polls. So again, I would yield to Director Pallotti or anyone else that may be able to speak to that narrative.
If I may follow up, unless you want Mr. Pallotti to speak.
Director, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. It definitely is an aging population of our workers who do that. And so it is, what's interesting is as younger individuals come up and participate in the election process, many of them vote by mail. They choose not to go to the polls. And I think some of them don't even understand what going to the polls is, because they're able to exercise their right to vote in a different method. And I think that as more people do that and don't go to the polls, I think we may see some drop off in interest in people going and working the polls. And I would say our more senior population didn't have that necessarily. They have many, many years of going to the polls, and that's what they're used to. And that's kind of, they grew up, they saw that, and then they continue on and they want to work the polls. So as some of those people age out, it can be a little bit challenging to get some other individuals to step up and do that. So, which adds to, again, making it a little bit challenging to try to fill the need of the workers that we need to execute the election.
Thank you. If I may follow up, Chair.
Councilwoman Baker.
So I just want to make sure that we're all clear, because I think earlier as we were discussing this, we were setting aside those small elections that were not included in what the county would participate in. But I think we were pretty clear to say that it was 3 to 5 a year of elections that Mr. Pallotti would like to use the resources of the county. I don't think it was 1 or 2. I think when Councilman Sweeney spoke, I think he asked that question, and it was on the average of 3 to 5 a year. So I go back to my original concern to say, how are we going to explain? And if we're on the track of wanting to encourage more of our county workers and feel that we don't want to discriminate against those that may want to, and we may go from 280 to 500 to 800 employees that want to participate in this voting or in this poll working, how do we explain the loss of service to the people that we are giving first priority to, that may be putting some at risk for the type of work that they do on many levels of what we serve? So I just want to make sure that we know that this is not a 1 or 2 shot. This is a 3 to 5 commitment of elections that need the assistance of the county workers. At least that is what we're hearing here today.
A point of clarification, because I do not want Mr. Sweeney to break his vow not to have to speak again. But I do believe that the question was how many elections on average occur. And I believe if Mr. Pallotti expressed that there could be anywhere from 3 to 5 in an average year, not that the need would require 3 to 5, but just how many elections occur in the year. So for this year, as an example, again, we've already had 3 elections this year, and to Mr. Pallotti's testimony, he did not need anyone from the county for those 3. It would have been nice, but for the one where in May, if I understood him correctly, but not a requirement. So I think this is a coordinated effort between the Board of Elections and our Human Resources Department to be able to execute, one, to make sure that there is a need there. So when the need exists, the director will coordinate with our Human Resources Department, and our Human Resources Department will then rely on the supervisors to ensure that we are not diminishing the services that we are expected to deliver our constituents. So I just want to make that abundantly clear. The number of elections that do occur in an annually can be anywhere from 3 to 5, and this year I think it's even 6. But the demand for county workers is not required or needed for every single election that occurs. So I want to be.
Councilman or Chair, can we ask Mr. Pilati, because just didn't hear that from him. I heard him say that there are many elections that go on that he does not need, but he's going to come back to the county when he has a larger election. I think there's at least a couple of them left this year, and they're going. So
there will be 3 remaining this year. So that is indeed correct. But I don't want you to be under the impression that there will be 5 elections in every year where we will be offering employees this opportunity to be able to both exercise their civic duty and be able to assist the Board of Elections with carrying out our democratic process. I do not believe, and Mr. Pilati can please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there has been a time in our history where we've had this many elections in one year. In 2017, I believe there was 3. In 2018, there were 2. In 2019, there were 3. In 2020, there were 3 total. So the average is generally 3, but this happens to be a unique year. So but again, I will yield to the director so that he can speak to this from his expertise, but I do not anticipate we will be repeating this cycle where we have more than 3 elections that occur in the year. So Director Pilati, please.
Yes. So, so my understanding of Councilman Sweeney's question was how many questions on average were there in a year? That was my understanding, and that's where the 3 to 5 came from. This is a unique year where we do have 6 elections. Again, the first 2, February and March, were not expected, and they were of a size where it wasn't a problem. This August election, that was, again, it's a unique situation. It was a special election that we did not anticipate coming, but it happened. So the ask for 2021 would be for assistance with the 3 remaining, August, September, and November. If I were to guess for calendar year 2022, I would need assistance most likely in May for a countywide gubernatorial primary, as well as in November of 22 for the countywide general gubernatorial election. Outside of that, I would only know of those 2. There may be a August special election that is a statutory date. Just don't know who may or may not file. And oftentimes those end up being maybe a municipality or a school district in which we may or may not need county assistance for that. So it is hard to know exactly because of having so many chartered communities within Cuyahoga County where specials can pop up. But many of the specials, I would say, outside of the city of Cleveland, with the city of Cleveland itself being a third of the county, a lot of times we can manage those. So again, to the chair's point, this is a unique year. Having 6, we did not plan that when we entered into this calendar year, and don't anticipate that next year. So we would have that, and the county does provide many, many important services. And I am not saying that my service is any more important than any of those. And the way that it's written, there does need to be supervisory approval, which I think is good. That helps to maintain that county services are being met. And I would just hope that maybe to the public, They're just shifting the service they're providing from one service to another for the day. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to ask. And, you know, it's such a unknown really number. We said 2 or in 3 this year. We don't know about next year. We know there's at least 2. But even if they had 2, that's 2 days of our county workers not providing services and leaving what they normally do to do something else, which is a good obligation to participate in, but it shouldn't be at the cost of what they're paid to do and at the risk perhaps of who they're helping. And that's, you know, besides the dollars that we're spending to do this, that would be my second concern. So thank you for the time and ability to ask.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Conwell, and then Councilman Schron after that.
Through the chair to, I guess, those that drafted this legislation. It goes to the Director Drucker, Director Pallotti and Chairwoman Brown's earlier point to connect with Director Drucker on the need. Would we need an amendment or a provision in this legislation that a certain number of days BOE would commend to hire outside workers before we interject county employees? I don't know what that process was last year. And Director Pomerantz may be able to speak to that when she actually had the conversation with Director Pallotti in regards to employees participating.
Through the chair, Michelle Pomerantz again. We did not look at this as something at the beginning. We had continuous communication regarding the election, and when there was a need beyond those who already were volunteers, Director Pallotti reached out and said he needed more support. So the one point I wanted to bring up to Councilwoman Baker's point is that there is consistent communication with the leadership of the Departments of Human Resources in this case, and also with Chief of Staff as well as Director Pallotti, so that there wasn't a situation where one department, all their employees left to work the polls. There was considered an often communication to make sure that those volunteers that were continuously being recruited at the same time, we didn't pull the trigger and offer any of our employees until there was a need. So the reason that it worked in 2020 was because of consistent communication between the directors to help and the supervisors to make sure that the volunteer pool did not debilitate any single department. And it was a kudos to Director Pallotti with the training and with his staff to continue to communicate who was applying, who was accepted, and to make sure that they actually did the work on election day. I have strong confidence that the Department of Human Resources with, again, Director Pallotti and his team are able to have those continued communications so that we're not looking for employees first, we're looking for volunteers and then supplementing the work of outreach for volunteers with some county employees. I don't believe the numbers are going to be quite as high.
Thank you, Director Pomerantz. Councilwoman Conwell, does that complete your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Councilman Schron, you have the floor.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I understood Director Pallotti saying that the delta on this thing has dropped to 75%. That is our attrition, and it's trending downward. So if I understood your numbers, that at 4,000 that your need, that means that we have a gap that's growing, and it's at the 1,000 level, and it's going to continue to grow as far as that demand for services. Is that correct? So, I mean, we're saying we're at 280 last time, and with effective marketing, we could increase that number. Well, that on the one side helps you, Director Pallotti, but on the flip side, it means that potentially if we got 1,000 employees that are no longer working for the county on that particular day, that would be approaching 25% of our workforce that is not working on the county. If I'm understanding your numbers correctly, is that you said you were at 75% and it's dropping? Is that a correct interpretation of what you were saying?
Councilman Strawn, correct. Our retention is 75%. That's from 2018 to present. We hope that it does not continue to drop. So we will, now that we come out of this pandemic, I think, we will continue to advertise and see what we can do, and hopefully we can get some stability. But what we don't know is we're allowed per the code to start training 60 days out prior to election day. And so what we do is, since we can start to train 60 days out, we go about 2 to 3 weeks prior to that. So about 2.5 months or more was when we start to reach out to workers to get them to ask them if they want to come back, give them kind of like a first bite at the apple of trying to get back into the election. And we do start some recruitment at that point in time to get applications in. So we don't necessarily know until we are about 2 months out from an election, kind of what our retention is going to look like for that particular election.
I personally believe the unintended consequences are you're going to see your 93% participation drop, continue to drop because of what we're doing here, paying our county employees twice what the person next to them getting paid. The other intended consequence is I think that the number of 280 is going to grow. So Mr. Drucker, Director Drucker, have you anticipated or built any factoring in for overtime? If we hit 1,000 of our workforce and we need to cover the work for them, do you see overtime being something that you'd be prescribing to cover that loss of wages?
No, Councilman, I do not. I believe that our supervision and directors are savvy enough to understand that people can't be released helter-skelter, and that their first obligation is to provide service to the residents of the county. The release time is a privilege. They'll set up whatever would be the appropriate number of people to be released without being detrimental to county service. I don't particularly see overtime being utilized to staff this effort.
Okay, and then following up on Councilman Sweeney's definition of supervisor, which is what
Yes.
we're going to hang this whole entire system on based on that individual. Your comment was you don't think that it's going to be a grievance. A grievance.
I don't believe that. I don't believe we're going to have grievances, sir.
Yep.
I don't believe that we'll have grievances out of it. We had people that had wanted to become poll workers last year, and were told that staffing didn't permit that, and we had no grievances coming forward.
Okay, and Director Huth.
And I'm hopeful we'll repeat that.
Yeah, Law Director Huth, do you think that this is potentially a grievance issue when we get to 1,000 people and we start having supervisors making that decision?
Councilman, no, I don't, because in most cases we would just fall back on the language in the CBA. So I don't think this is going to be an issue.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
All right, thank you very much. So I think the thing that some of us may be forgetting is that the Board of Elections is an extension. It is under the county. So it is also incumbent upon us to be able to make sure that this entity works out successfully as well. So I don't think that we would sacrifice one department for the other. As Director Pallotti pointed out, all of the work that we do is very important. This is something that I think is important to our democratic process. And as the nation continues to have conversations around voter suppression and voting becoming more difficult, I think that it is very thoughtful, wise, and considerate of Council President Jones, and as well as Conwell for her sponsorship, and Sweeney Miller for their commitment to support this proposed legislation, to make sure that we ensure that we can provide an opportunity for our democratic process to run smoothly. So with that said, I'm going to make the motion to move this out of committee under second reading suspension. Do I have a second?
Second, Conwell.
Been moved and seconded. Are there any additional question, comments, or concerns? And two, please add my name if it isn't already. If there are no additional questions, comments, or concerns, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this will move to the full body of the council under second reading suspension. That was our only piece of legislation before us today, and certainly had some very healthy discussion, and appreciate everyone's time and thoughtfulness around this matter. Our democracy is important. It is a fragile thing. And so creating pathways to make sure it stays intact is certainly something I think we can all appreciate at the end of the day. So if nothing else holds our attention, is there any miscellaneous business? Councilman Miller, you have the floor.
Yes, I would just also like to have my name added to the legislation. Thank you.
Please add Councilman Miller's name to that legislation. Anyone else? All right, well, if nothing else holds our attention, there's no miscellaneous business. This meeting is adjourned.